Shit, so it's Friday night, pretty much early Saturday morning now. It's like 2 in the morning, I think. And I'm sitting here frustrated because some fucked up shit happened with my bank account. And I don't know, I think this shit might have got hacked or something. And I gotta figure that out. And I don't like, my money being played with. I don't think anybody do for real. So I gotta take my mind off of that. Like, the grass ain't really helping too much. I need something to kind of occupy my mind. So I'm like, fuck it, let me make some videos, you know what I mean? I can put up on YouTube and shit. So I'm like, fuck it, man, let me tell a story, yo. I ain't really told no stories like that. I remember I told one story, dude told me I wasn't talking about shit. So I'm like, man, fuck it, yo. Maybe I'll come with a story next time. It might be a little more entertaining and shit. And even if it ain't entertaining, maybe somebody can learn from some shit that I say, you know what I mean? I don't really care what one person gotta say, you know what I mean? That's on some negative shit. It's just shit, you know what I mean? It might have been, you know what I mean, boring, or I wasn't really talking about nothing, but I think this one though, man, this one is interesting, I think, you know what I mean? Because I feel like I kind of might have been in the wrong. I might have been a crud ball a little bit, you know what I mean, as we say in Maryland and shit. Um, I don't know, yo. So about what year was it? I'll say 2004 maybe. I was on this. I used to go on this forum and shit to download albums and shit. You know how we used to do back in the downloading days and shit. You could go on like torrent sites and forums and shit, download albums and all that. Um, but when I was on there, I would also go into like the part where people was posting their music, and this when I first started rapping. So I would go in there and just post my music and shit. And a couple dudes would come in there and get feedback and share their music. We chop it up and shit. So one of these dudes, I ended up getting real cool with. Um, he lived in another state, pretty far from where I live and shit. But I had my best friend, lived in the same state that I grew up with. You know what I mean? He ended up moving to that state, so I would go out there and holler at him. So I'll go out there, holler at him, and like find out that I'm not too far from, the dude I've been chopping it up with that I met on the forum, and we did some songs together through, the internet and shit. So we talked about, if I ever came out that way, we link up and do some music and shit. So that's pretty much what happened, you know what I mean, when I went, to the state he was in. We linked up, I stayed at his crib, I think for a couple of days and shit, and we just worked on some music, was chilling, you know what I mean? Shit was cool, yo. He had, three younger brothers, two of them was close to our age and shit, and they did music as well. They made beats and shit, so shit was cool for real, you know what I mean? I was like, if I come back out this way, you know what I mean, I'ma holler at you and shit. So I think, maybe like a year and some change, couple years later, you know what I mean, I ended up going out there specifically, just go chill with yo and shit, and stay at his crib, and like I said, it was him, you know what I mean, his mom Dukes and his three brothers and shit. But I knew he had a sister and shit because he had told me about her, and then like he had talked about her in songs and shit. So I knew he had a sister, but I ain't even really know nothing else besides that. So I just knew that what I mean, she wasn't there the first time because I didn't see no other female in there besides his moms and shit. You know what I mean? And moms is moms. She get the respect for real. So I ended up going back out there the second time, stayed a little longer and shit. So I remember, we sat at the dinner table and shit, and they talking about, how I guess the sister about to, come back around and shit, and they, joking like, yeah, we should hook her up with, you know, talking about hooking her up with me and shit, and I'm kind of lost because I'm like, man, I don't know, you know what I mean, with, who the girl is or, nothing like that, and I don't know if they for real or whatever, but I ain't think nothing of it, so, I think maybe like a day or two later, the girl, his sister ended up, showing up, and she closer to his age and shit. She was the second oldest, and she shows up with a boyfriend, and which I think ended up being a baby father and shit. And they show up, and I'm introduced and all that, and I'm like, what's up? How y'all doing? I think me and my homeboy and the baby father ended up smoking or some shit like that, and everything was everything. I ain't think nothing of it and shit. So that was that. Fast forward, I get back, here to Maryland and shit. Mind you, me and homeboy, like, we was making music and shit, but like we was starting to, really like, put some shit together. I gotta get this part out the way. Like we was, like we had a song on the radio, cause I had put it on my MySpace page and shit, and a radio station, over here on the Eastern Shore and shit. A DJ hit me and was like, "Hey, y'all, fuck with this song. Yo, can I play it on my radio show?" So I'm like, "Hell yeah!" So my man's he on the song, getting played on the radio and like a whole different, state and shit. So I'm like, shit, that's a good look. And then I remember when I was out there with him, we were supposed to have a show at the at a pretty big venue over there and shit. And then I think, the shit ended up getting canceled at the last minute because it was like a stabbing there like the night before or some shit. So we was, we had some dope music, we had a good chemistry. We was around the same age, I think like a month apart or some shit, so shit was cool, yo. It was like to a point where it was like a brotherhood, I can definitely say that, yo. It was more than music for real, yo, which, kind of make, how shit ended up pretty fucked up. But so like I said, I had, met the sister and all that and didn't really think nothing of it. But, I get back to Maryland and shit. I get I guess it was an ad on MySpace. I don't even remember how that shit worked for real. But like, anyway, she hit me up on MySpace and was like, hey, I'm such and such sister. Remember me? Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, I remember you. How you been? It was nice meeting you out there. We ain't really chop it up like that. But, it was cool meeting you and shit. And it just kind of went from there. Now, I do gotta say this, yo. Shorty was attractive, yo. She was definitely attractive, yo. And I'm gonna just leave it at that, yo. But she was also a cool person too, though. You know what I mean? Like we had some dope conversations and shit, and shit. You know what I mean? Definitely kind of like wasn't on my bingo card for real, but it led to us. Talking real heavy, and then kind of like making a couple little plans if I ever came back out there type shit. But you know, like I said earlier, like they had joked about that shit at the dinner table before Shorty had even got there and shit. So he ended up finding out, that me and his sister was chopping it up and shit, and he was not pleased about it at all, yo. And he hit me up on what was back then it was like AOL Instant Messenger and shit. And he hit me up and I can't remember what he said because this shit was probably like 15 years ago, but maybe a little longer and shit. But yeah, he wasn't pleased, yo. He kind of came at me a little crazy, and I'm like, yeah, yo. He like basically like, yo, like stop talking to my sister. That's crazy, you know what I mean? You like my brother, and that's sick, yo. And I'm just like, man, I'm like, I hear you, yo. You know what I mean? I'm like, we all grown and shit, yo. Hit him with something else, and he like, yeah. He was like, I ain't even really trying to hear all that, you know what I mean? Like you heard what I said, blah blah blah. And I'm like, oh shit, he on that, all right. So fast forward, me and Shorty still talking for real, yo, and like I'm not really I mean, he ain't never gonna see this, and if he do, then it is what it is. We ain't spoke since. But like furthest it got, yo, was Shorty sent me a couple little pictures and shit for real, you know what I mean? You know how that shit go. Like I think that was kinda like when camera phones was really starting to be the wave for real. But a couple little flex and shit, little attachments and shit for real. But that was about it. You know what I mean? I ain't never make it back out there because, I ain't even gonna lie, Shorty was trifling and shit for real, yo. And looking back, I'm like, I kind of like, I don't know if I really have what I call regrets, but I mean, if shit could have played out different, you know what I mean? But it was like I was younger, you know what I'm saying? I was in my 20s, early 20s and shit. And like, You know what I mean? He kind of came at me like I was looking at his sister, like, you know what I mean? She was a whore. I think, you know what I mean? He said, like, yo, you coming at my sister like she a jump or some shit. And I'm like, nah, bro, it ain't even like that, bro. Because first of all, you know what I mean? She drew on me, but I ain't even get into all that. But like I said, man, we had good chemistry on the mic, yo. Like, you know what I mean? Like creatively, you know what I mean? Shit was good, yo. But just the way, you know what I mean, he was real, you know what I mean, irritated and mad about that situation, like real angry, man. It was almost like reminded me of Scarface and Manolo, yo, on Scarface, yo. It was just like, I mean, I ain't gonna say yo was gonna kill me about it like Scarface did Manolo, but it was just like just the anger he had towards that situation. I'm like, I remember he seen my cousin on MySpace and shit, yo, and you know what I mean, was talking about, you know, how much, he wanted to holler at her if he ever came around and, you know, how attractive she was. And I'm like, shit, I got you, bro. You know what I mean? I'll tell cuz, you know what I mean, to like chop it up with you and shit. So I didn't, you know what I mean? I kind of figured it'd be the same energy, but I guess, you know, when it's your sister, it's a little different. But I mean, I guess, you know, I don't even know if it's really a moral of the story as much as like, you know what I mean? Like, I guess, you know what I mean? You got to like kind of just weigh it out, man. Like, you know, I don't know, yo. Like I said, I ain't really see myself doing anything wrong. And then eventually later on, yo, he like reached out to, you know what I mean, like my bro, you know what I mean, that he know and shit, you know what I mean, and you know, told him, you know, he asked for me and shit and that he missed me and shit. And it's like it ain't really no hard feelings now, but it's just like I don't even know if, you know what I mean, shit like that can really be repaired. You know what I mean? It's more so like I wish him well, you know what I mean? I don't got nothing really bad to say, you know what I mean? I just wish it would have worked out different, but I mean, it is what it is, yo. Like I said, I might have, you know what I mean? I might have been in the wrong, depending on how you look at the situation. Like I said, I didn't really think, you know what I mean? Like once he said what he said, it's like, all right, you know what I mean? Maybe I could have fell back, but it's like I don't really appreciate how you came at me. So now, you know what I mean? Me being the person I was back then, I was kind of like spiteful about it. And it's like, oh, all right, well now you really gonna make me, you know what I mean? Play on the situation. So, but in the end, it wasn't worth it, yo. You know what I mean? He kind of tried to warn me about that, like, you know, she ain't right and all that. But it's like, hey, man, I was kind of a dickhead back then. You know what I mean? Crud ball, whatever. Like, but yeah, I mean, I wish we could have, you know what I mean, kept the music thing going. I still got a song we did, but you know what I mean? I don't know if it'll ever get, you know, released again. But I don't know, yo. Shout out to him, man. If you ever see this, you know who he is, yo. And if anybody else knows the situation, they know. But I ain't gonna drop no names and no shit like that, but I just think, you know what I mean, try to keep shit, you know what I mean, that personal shit up out of shit, I guess, if you got like some good shit going, like, you know, creatively with the music, you know what I mean, and can possibly make some moves and shit. Like, it ain't too many people I like did the duo shit with, but like me and him, you know what I mean, you know what I mean, we was that for real, yo, but it is what it is, man. Shit happen, yo. Rich.